Stop scrolling for just 1 second. Look at your phone. Nobody texted you about your dream. Look around you. Nobody's waiting to fund your vision. Nobody's coming to wake you up at 5 a.m. when your discipline breaks. And if you fail, the world won't stop. It will simply continue. Without you, this is not a motivational video. This will remove the last excuse protecting your inaction. And once that excuse is gone, what's left will terrify you more than loneliness ever did. Watch carefully, because after this, you can never again say nobody supported me. There is a moment, if you are lucky enough to experience it, when reality strips everything away. You check your phone. Nothing that moves your future forward. You look at the people around you, comfortable, busy, completely unconcerned with your ambition. And then it hits you. Nobody is coming. Nobody is coming to understand your vision. Nobody is coming to fund your dream. Nobody is coming to push you at 5 a.m. when your discipline has already collapsed on the floor beside you. And if you fail, the world will not gather in sympathy. It will not pause. It will not mourn what could have been. It will simply continue. Without you, most people experience this moment as abandonment. They say, I had no support. I had no guidance. Nobody believed in me. And they are right. Nobody did. But here's what they miss. History has never been written by the supported. It has been written by individuals who learn to function in psychological isolation, without begging for emotional oxygen, without waiting for permission, without needing someone else to confirm that their ambition was worth pursuing. And no mind understood this brutal architecture of power more clearly than Nicolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli did not write for the comfortable. He wrote for the sovereign. For the individual who accepts a dependence on others is a most elegant form of self-destruction. A prince who relies on external forces does not rule his destiny. He negotiates with it. The same applies to you. The moment your discipline requires encouragement, your ambition becomes fragile. The moment your execution depends on support, your future becomes conditional. This is a dark truth that society buries beneath motivational slogans. And if you are watching this feeling unsupported, misunderstood, or completely alone, understand something important. You are standing at the exact psychological threshold where two paths divide. One leads to excuses. The other leads to empires. But before you continue, know this. This will not comfort you. It will not validate your loneliness. It will not sympathize with your circumstances. It will remove the final excuse protecting your inaction. And once that excuse is gone, you will be left with something far more terrifying than loneliness. Your own responsibility. The lonely phase. When you realize nobody is coming, something inside you destabilizes. Not externally, internally, because support is more than assistance. It is psychological cushioning. It softens doubt. It absorbs fear. It distributes responsibility so the weight never fully lands on you. When that cushioning disappears, impact becomes direct. Every risk feels heavier. Every delay feels personal. Every failure feels completely exposed. This is a lonely phase, and most people misread it entirely. They think loneliness means they are behind. They think isolation means they are incapable. They think silence means they are invisible. But historically, silence has almost always preceded transformation. When Machiavelli was removed from political office in Florence, he didn't simply lose power. He lost proximity to power. And proximity creates identity. Without the court, without the influence, without daily relevance, he was simply a man outside the system, imprisoned, tortured, exiled. No public defense, no political rescue, just distance. But that distance was important, because distance forces confrontation. When you are surrounded by noise, you can avoid yourself. When you are surrounded by people, you can blame your circumstances. But when you are completely alone, patterns become visible. You see exactly where your discipline collapses without supervision. You notice how often you seek validation before taking action. You begin to understand how much of your ambition was simply fueled by being seen. The lonely phase removes the audience. And without an audience, performance has no reward. So the real question becomes, were you building or were you performing? When someone asks about your progress, it is easy to sound ambitious. When someone praises your effort, it is easy to feel productive. But when nobody asks, when nobody praises, when nobody cares, That is where authenticity begins. This phase strips away ego-driven effort. It forces you to work without recognition. And recognition is addictive. It releases dopamine, reinforces identity, makes you feel significant. Without it, your work feels heavier, slower, less exciting. That is why most people retreat here. They shrink their goals to fit their emotional comfort. They return to environments that feel safe. They choose belonging over growth. But if you endure the lonely phase correctly, something shifts. You stop announcing. You stop explaining. You stop seeking agreement. Your moves become quiet, calculated, strategic. In Exile, Machiavelli wrote The Prince, not as a ruler, but as an observer, removed from power. He analyzed it with greater clarity than he ever had while holding it. Isolation sharpened his perception. The same can happen to you. When you are no longer entangled in constant conversation, your thinking deepens. When you stop chasing approval, your standards rise. When comparison no longer distracts you, your execution improves. But only if you resist desperation. Desperation is a real enemy of this phase. The urge to partner too quickly. The urge to downgrade your ambition so others can relate to it. The urge to talk about building instead of actually building. Desperation leaks energy. Patience stores it. Understand this. If nobody supports you right now, it may simply be because there is nothing visible yet to support. Momentum attracts allies. Proof attracts investors. Results attract belief. But proof is built in private. Internal authority. This is where internal authority forms. Internal authority means you act without applause. You correct yourself without supervision. You continue without reassurance. Most people never develop this. They rely on structure to discipline them. They rely on deadlines to push them. They rely on others to measure their progress. Remove those external forces, and they stall completely. But if you build the ability to regulate yourself in isolation, you become structurally independent. You don't need someone to motivate you. You don't need someone to validate you. You don't need someone to pressure you. You apply pressure internally. That is power. Not loud power. Not visible power. Controlled power. The lonely phase is not about proving yourself to others. It is about stabilizing yourself without them. Because if your ambition cannot survive isolation, it will never survive pressure. And pressure is coming. Opportunity brings pressure. Visibility brings pressure. Growth brings pressure. Isolation is preparation. Right now you are not meant to expand. You are meant to strengthen. Not to impress, but to solidify. Because once you can operate without support, support becomes optional. And when support becomes optional, you stop being dependent. You start being dangerous. Killing the need for validation. Surviving isolation is one thing, but surviving it is not enough. If you still crave recognition while building in silence, you are unstable, because the need for validation is subtle. It doesn't scream at you. It whispers. It tells you to post the progress, to hint at the plan, to announce the grind. Not because it helps, because it feels good. Validation is a drug. Approval releases reward chemicals in your brain. Agreement reduces internal tension. Attention confirms your identity. And when you have no support, the temptation for validation becomes even stronger. You tell yourself you're building a network. You tell yourself you're sharing the journey. But most of the time, you are leaking energy. Every time you speak about a goal prematurely, your brain registers partial completion. You feel progress without producing results. That is dangerous, because ambition requires stored pressure. Look at Machiavelli during exile. No audience, no public platform, no status, just observation. He studied power from a distance. He wrote privately. He sharpened his thinking without applause. And when The Prince was completed, it was not noise. It was concentrated strategy. That is the difference. Validation seeks reaction. Strategy seeks leverage. If you need people to believe in you before you act, you are outsourcing your confidence. And outsourced confidence collapses under pressure. The same people who praise you today can doubt you tomorrow. The same crowd that applauds success can disappear at failure. Crowds are unstable. Internal standards are not. This is why eliminating the need for validation is not optional. It is essential. When nobody is watching, your effort becomes pure. No aesthetic performance. No curated narrative. No inflated self-image. Just output. You stop asking, does this look impressive? And start asking, does this produce results? You stop asking, will they like this? And start asking, does this move me forward? That shift is ruthless. It forces you to completely detach your identity from perception. Most people cannot do this. They are more addicted to being seen as ambitious than to actually being effective. They want to be perceived as disciplined more than they want to actually be disciplined. They want to talk about the grind more than they want to endure it. But when you truly accept that nobody is coming, something powerful happens. You realize nobody is judging you either. That fear, what will they think, dissolves because they are not thinking about you. They are thinking about themselves. This is liberation. You can experiment privately, fail privately, improve privately. No social penalty for mistakes. No reputation to protect. No audience to perform for. This is asymmetrical advantage. While others are performing success online, you are engineering it offline. While others are announcing goals, you are executing silently. While others seek encouragement, you are building competence. And competence does not need validation. Competence speaks through results. Here is the real transformation. When you kill the need for validation, your emotional volatility drops dramatically. Criticism doesn't destabilize you. Silence doesn't discourage you. Lack of praise doesn't slow you down. You become internally regulated, calm, precise, hard to influence. And people who are hard to influence are hard to control. That is strategic independence. Something ironic happens over time. The same people who ignored you begin to notice. The same people who doubted you begin to ask questions. The same people who offered no support begin to show interest. But by then, you no longer require it. That is a shift. Validation becomes optional. And when something becomes optional, it loses all power over you. Structure, engineering your isolation. Once you stop needing validation, a new problem appears. Freedom. Nobody is checking on you. Nobody is setting deadlines. Nobody is measuring your output. And freedom without structure creates drift. This is where many self-reliant people fail. They survived isolation. They eliminated the need for approval, but they never replace external structure with internal systems. So they move inconsistently, inspired one week, distracted the next, disciplined in bursts, absent in silence. That is not power. That is emotional productivity. And emotional productivity collapses under real pressure. When Machiavelli was exiled, he didn't sit in resentment. He created rhythm. Historical accounts describe how he structured his days deliberately, engaging in manual tasks, reading classical texts, analyzing political history, writing with precision. He had no authority, but he maintained order. That distinction matters, because power is not built from motivation. It is built from repetition. When you have no support, discipline becomes your infrastructure. You need systems that function regardless of your mood. Wake time, work block, skill development, reflection, execution. Not dramatic, not glamorous, consistent. Structure eliminates negotiation. When you operate without structure, every day becomes a debate. Should I work now? Do I feel focused enough? Maybe later. That internal negotiation drains energy before you have even begun. Systems remove that conversation entirely. You don't decide whether to execute. You execute because it is scheduled. This is the shift from ambition to engineering. Most people romanticize grinding alone, but grinding without direction is simply chaos with extra steps. You don't need intensity. You need architecture. Architecture of skill. Architecture of output. Architecture of measurable improvement. Ask yourself, what are you building every single day? Not thinking about, not planning to build, building. Because in isolation, your greatest advantage is uninterrupted focus. No meetings, no social obligations, no external pressure. That silence can either create drift or depth. Depth requires deliberate practice. Choose one core skill that moves your ambition forward. Study it, train it, refine it, track measurable progress. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, it was not a random emotional release. It was structured thought, clear principles, historical references, strategic conclusions. Isolation gave him time. Structure gave him output. Time alone does not guarantee growth. Directed time does. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They mistake being busy for actually building. They consume information endlessly, podcasts, videos, motivational quotes. But consumption is not construction. You must produce, write, build, code, train, sell, study actively, something that creates tangible, measurable improvement. Because tangible improvement compounds, and compounding is invisible at first. That is why most people quit. The first month shows almost no change. The second feels repetitive. The third feels painfully slow. But around the fourth, fifth, sixth month, skill sharpens. Confidence stabilizes. Execution accelerates. That is the power of quiet structure. Here is something critical. Structure protects you from your own emotions. There will be days when doubt resurfaces. Days when isolation feels unbearably heavy. Days when comparison tries to pull you sideways. Structure absorbs those fluctuations. You don't stop because you feel uncertain. You follow the system. Over time, identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is trying. You begin seeing yourself as someone who operates. That identity is unshakable because it is built on behavior, not hope. And once behavior becomes consistent, results become inevitable. Isolation gave you detachment. Eliminating validation gave you clarity. Structure gives you momentum. Now you are no longer simply surviving alone. You are advancing alone. And advancement creates something powerful. Proof. Not loud proof. Not public proof. Private proof. You see the numbers improve. You see the skill sharpen. You see the output increase. That builds internal confidence that requires no applause. And once you have private proof, the external world becomes far less intimidating. Because when opportunity appears, you are not hoping you are ready. You know you are. Rejection is data, not a verdict. By now, you understand something fundamental. Nobody is coming. You are building alone. You are disciplined. You are structured. But here is where most people still fail. They take rejection personally. Anna replies. No opportunities. No recognition. And even after becoming self-reliant, something inside still reacts. That reaction is ego. Rejection feels like a verdict, as if the world evaluated everything you are and simply said no. But rejection is rarely a verdict. Rejection is information. When Machiavelli attempted to regain political favor after exile, he was not immediately welcomed back into power. He wrote letters. He attempted to reconnect. He positioned himself strategically. He faced resistance. But instead of collapsing emotionally, he observed. He studied the political climate. He analyzed who held influence. He assessed what the system now valued, not what it had valued before. That is the key. Most people interpret rejection through identity. They don't believe in me. I'm not good enough. I'm not ready. But powerful individuals interpret rejection through strategy. What variable am I missing? What leverage do I lack? What proof haven't I demonstrated yet? Rejection becomes feedback. When you have no support, rejection feels amplified. There is no emotional buffer. No one telling you it's their loss. No chorus of encouragement to balance the silence. Good. That forces clarity. If 10 doors close, that is a pattern. And patterns contain data. Maybe your skill is not sharp enough yet. Maybe your communication lacks precision. Maybe your value simply isn't visible enough. Instead of defending your ego, improve your position. In The Prince, there is a brutal underlying principle. Adapt to reality, or lose. The world does not reward intention. It rewards leverage. If you are being ignored, you lack leverage. If you are being dismissed, you lack leverage. If you are being overlooked, you lack leverage. That is not an insult. That is clarity. And clarity is power, because now the problem is completely solvable. Instead of saying nobody supports me, ask why would they? That question changes everything. Why would someone invest? Why would someone believe? Why would someone align? Emotionally, you want support for your potential. Strategically, the world supports proof. So build undeniable proof. If they ignore your pitch, refine it. If they doubt your skill, sharpen it. If they overlook your value, amplify it. Every rejection reveals friction. Remove the friction. Here is the deeper transformation. You must completely detach rejection from self-worth. Powerful people are not rejected less frequently. They are simply less emotional about rejection. They expect it. They anticipate it. They design their strategy around it. Rejection becomes calibration. It refines your execution. It tightens your strategy. It exposes a blind spot you couldn't see before. Over time, something profound happens. You stop fearing rejection. And once you stop fearing rejection, you attempt bigger moves, bolder strategies, higher stakes, larger opportunities, because the worst outcome, no longer destabilizes you. And that freedom expands your entire range. Most people play small to avoid rejection. You play precise to learn from it. That is the difference. Power, the most dangerous phase. At some point, if you endure long enough, it starts working. Your skill sharpens. Your results improve. Your name begins to circulate. Opportunities appear where silence used to live. And this is the most dangerous phase you have faced so far. Because struggle is predictable. Power is not. When you had nothing, your focus was pure. You were disciplined because you had to be. You were silent because nobody cared. You were strategic because you had no margin for error. But now, people are watching. Offers are arriving. Attention is returning. And attention changes behavior. The same isolation that built you can be completely undone by recognition if you are not careful. Machiavelli's writings were not only about acquiring power. They were about maintaining it. Because acquiring influence is one battle. Managing it is an entirely different war. In The Prince, one principle is clear. New rulers are unstable. Why? Because success shifts psychology. When you rise quickly, ego expands. When you gain attention, caution decreases. When people begin praising you, honest self-assessment weakens. This is where many self-made individuals collapse. They confuse momentum with permanence. They mistake early wins for structural dominance. But early success is fragile. You must protect it. First rule, do not change your standards because your position changed. The discipline that built you must remain. The structure that stabilized you must stay. The silence that sharpened you must still exist. Recognition should not alter your routine. If your work ethic drops when success appears, you were never truly disciplined. You were desperate. Desperation builds. Ego destroys. Second rule, do not expand faster than your competence. When opportunities multiply, saying yes to everything is tempting. More exposure, more partnerships, more risk. But expansion without depth creates cracks. Power amplifies weaknesses. If your systems are not strong, growth will expose every instability you thought you had hidden. Control your pace. Controlled growth outlasts explosive visibility every single time. Third rule, detach from admiration. When people who once ignored you begin praising you, it feels deeply validating. But admiration is as unstable as rejection. The same crowd that elevates you can turn the moment perception shifts. If your identity becomes tied to praise, you become reactive again. You work too hard to regain emotional independence. Do not surrender it now. Power must be handled with complete emotional neutrality. Calm when rising. Calm when criticized. Calm when envied. Calm when doubted. Because volatility at this stage attracts enemies. And with visibility comes resistance. When you had nothing, nobody saw you as competition. When you begin gaining ground, dynamics shift. People compare. People calculate. People position themselves against you. This is natural. Don't become paranoid. Become precise. Maintain your competence. Strengthen your leverage. Keep building depth behind every piece of visibility. The goal is not to look powerful. The goal is to be structurally unshakable. Another shift happens here. You begin realizing you don't need everyone. Earlier, you felt the painful absence of support. Now you begin seeing an abundance of shallow support. And shallow support is more dangerous than none at all because it distracts. Choose alignment carefully. Selective alliances. Selective exposure. Selective trust. Not out of fear. Out of strategy. Remember this. Isolation built your foundation. Discipline built your momentum. Rejection built your precision. Power will test your restraint. If you can remain composed while rising, you become rare. Because most people are stable in struggle. Very few are stable in success. The world doesn't only test your ability to endure nothing. It tests your ability to handle something. Master that, and you stop being someone who survived alone. You become someone who chose power deliberately. The circle, choose from strength. At the beginning, you had nobody. That was painful. Then it became powerful. Now you are no longer desperate. You have built skill. You have built structure. You have handled rejection. You have tasted momentum. And here is the final evolution. You no longer need support, which means for the very first time, you can choose it correctly. This is where most people make a critical mistake. They endure isolation. They build themselves. And the moment opportunity for partnership appears, they overcorrect. They attach too quickly. Because somewhere inside, the memory of loneliness still lives. They don't want to return to having nobody. So they accept alliances that dilute them. But alliances built from fear recreate dependency. And dependency is exactly what you escaped. Machiavelli's clearest strategic warning was about alliances formed from weakness. In The Prince, he emphasizes that rulers who depend entirely on others for protection or influence lose autonomy entirely. The same principle applies here. If you partner because you are afraid to stand alone again, you surrender your leverage. But if you partner from strength, you negotiate on entirely different terms. You are not looking to be saved. You are looking to expand. That difference changes everything. When you choose alliances from need, you tolerate misalignment. You ignore red flags. You compromise standards. You silence intuition because isolation terrifies you. But isolation no longer frightens you. You survived it. You built inside it. You sharpened within it. So your criteria must now be ruthless. Does this alliance multiply my leverage or dilute it? Does this person respect my structure or disrupt it? Does this partnership accelerate growth or simply create emotional noise? The strongest position in any negotiation is indifference, not arrogance, not coldness. Indifference born from genuine capability. If this works, good. If it doesn't, you continue alone. That mindset forces respect, because people sense when you don't need them. And paradoxically, that is precisely when they value you most. Earlier, you wanted belief. Now you require alignment. Belief is emotional. Alignment is structural. Belief says, I support you. Alignment says, our strengths compound each other. Belief disappears under pressure. Alignment survives it. Another shift emerges here. You stop chasing proximity to power. In the beginning, you wanted access. Access to people. Access to networks. Access to influence. But once you build yourself, you realize something fundamental. Access without leverage makes you subordinate. Leverage creates equal footing. Now you don't walk into rooms hoping to be accepted. You walk in assessing whether the room deserves your time. That is evolution. Isolation built independence. Discipline built competence. Discernment now protects it. And discernment is what separates genuine growth from entanglement. Not every opportunity is strategic. Not every connection is beneficial. Not every expansion is necessary. When you had nothing, any movement felt valuable. Now you must protect your momentum. Because your time is your capital. Your focus is your weapon. Your structure is your edge. And the wrong alliance can fracture all three. Choose carefully. Choose slowly. Choose from strength. Because the goal was never to prove you could stand alone forever. The goal was to ensure that if everyone disappeared again, you would still stand. That confidence changes everything about how you move through the world. You no longer fear being alone. You no longer chase belonging. You no longer tolerate misalignment. That is a final internal shift. The truth, clean and brutal. No inspiration. No violence. No believe in yourself speech. Just reality. Nobody cares about your struggle. They care about outcomes. You can tell people how hard you are working. You can explain your circumstances. You can describe how unfair everything has been. It changes nothing. The world does not reward effort. It rewards value. That is a brutal shift that zero support forces upon you. You stop romanticizing the grind. You start auditing your performance. When there was no applause, skill became the only currency that mattered. That is a hidden upside of isolation. It strips away ego. It exposes delusion. It forces you to measure yourself against reality instead of against compliments. Machiavelli did not write about what sounded noble in The Prince. He wrote about what actually kept rulers in power. And power is not maintained through good intentions. It is maintained through results and positioning. The same applies to your life. You don't rise because you deserve to. You rise because you become difficult to ignore. Zero support teaches you one dangerous lesson above all others. Excuses do not scale. If you fail and nobody is there to soften the blow, you either fix the weakness or you repeat the failure. There is no emotional cushion, no one to absorb the impact. That environment is brutal, but it creates sharp operators. Here is what changes permanently. You stop talking early and execute longer. You stop announcing moves and complete them. You stop needing people to understand the vision and focus entirely on building proof. Because proof silences everything. When nobody was clapping, you learned to measure your own progress. Numbers, skill, growth, output, leverage, not feelings, data. That is maturity. Most people remain stuck because they want comfort while they build. You built without it, which means you learn discipline the hard way. And discipline compounds. Motivation fades. Support fluctuates. Trends shift. Discipline scales. This is where you permanently separate from the crowd. You no longer chase recognition. You chase improvement. You don't ask why don't they see it. You ask how do I sharpen my edge. That question changes everything. It makes you less emotional, more strategic, less reactive, more calculated. When something fails, you don't spiral. You adjust. When someone doubts you, you don't argue. You build. When opportunity disappears, you don't complain. You create alternatives. Here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody says out loud. Most people secretly want someone to save them. An investor, a mentor, a partner, a lucky break. But if you have truly operated with zero support, you understand something deeper. Even if help arrives, you still have to carry yourself. Nobody can substitute competence. Nobody can replace execution. Nobody can inject discipline into you from the outside. Either you built it or you didn't. That is the final filter. You don't need hype. You don't need validation. You don't need reassurance. You need leverage. Leverage in skill. Leverage in positioning. Leverage in decision-making. And leverage comes from repeated execution under sustained pressure. That is what isolation gave you, pressure without relief. And if you didn't break, you hardened. And here is the part nobody ever says out loud. Once you become effective, people will rewrite your story. They will say you were always talented. They will say you were lucky. They will say it just worked out for you. They will not mention the nights nobody called, the projects nobody funded, the effort nobody acknowledged. And that is perfectly fine, because you didn't build for applause. You built for independence. That is the real victory. Not fame, not attention, not revenge. Independence. The ability to move without permission. The ability to survive without endorsement. The ability to expand without attachment. That is power. So here is the clean ending. Stop waiting. Stop explaining. Stop looking around for someone to believe in you first. Measure your output. Increase your value. Sharpen your execution. Nobody is coming. Good. That means there is no interference. If this made you uncomfortable, that was intentional. Comfort does not create leverage. If you want more content that prioritizes effectiveness over emotion, like the video. If you are serious about becoming someone who produces rather than someone who complains, subscribe. Then close this and go build something real.